Hi, I'm Dustin Wardell with Black Gold Sights. I'm here to talk today about our new Mountain Lite sight that we just came out with. We're really excited about this sight. It is a small, lightweight, compact version of our Ascent Verdict sight. It has all of our great features of first, second, and third axis adjustments, just like you're used to in our standard Ascent. But again, coming in that smaller, compact, more lightweight sight. Other cool feature about this sight is we have a dual indicator needle system. A lot of people want to ask, why do we decided to go with a dual indicator system? We have a lot of guys doing 3D shooting, and as what we're finding is they'd like to dial in those short distance shots, those 25, 33, 42, but they're using a 5-pin multiple pin sight. I have a 3-pin here in my hand. Just kind of want to go over from package to setup with this sight. So we'll get started. So in the packages, what you'll find here is we'll just bust this thing open so you can see. You'll find your mounting screws, and you'll find also an extra set of dual indicator needles, and I'll explain why we send an extra set. And I'll just show you real quick, I guess I'll just show you really quick what these are. Is they're offset indicator needles. So if you're setting up your 5-pin sight and you're doing your 20 and your 60-yard pin, you can get your needles spaced far enough apart. Occasionally you might have to have them super close together, and as you play with the sight more, you'll see what I'm talking about as we go through the setup. Also inside the packaging, you'll see your 54 sight tapes are in there, and then on the inside of the product card is your setup instructions on how to set up your first, second, and third axis adjustments. After you've taken everything out, you've got the sight bolted on your bow. So what you want to do, get your first, second, and third axis set up. We'll go over that a little bit later. When you're sighting in your sight with a multiple pin movable sight, there's a lot of questions of how do I set that up. What our recommendation is you dial the sight all the way to the top. There is a stop there. As soon as that stops, you're there. You can lock that sight in. You don't have to, but you can. So once you get that locked in, just sight in your pins like you normally would, 20, 30, 40. I'm going to talk about with the 3-pin setup instead of the 5. So set up 20, 30, 40 just like you normally would, and that's your starting point of how everything's going to go. So when you dial this sight down for those indicator needles in longer shots, is what you'll find is you can dial back up, and we call this a zero stop and zero out. So you're back to 20, 30, 40, and it's going to be that way every time. So after you have that sighted in, the next step you're really going to want to do is work on your sight tape. This is something that with all of our movable sights is the best way to do this. Or I find this to be the best practice, easiest way to do this. There's about 20 different ways to do a sight tape, but what my favorite thing to do is I'll sight in 20, 30, 40, I'll grab my bow, and then what I'll do is I'll take those pins and I will take it to the sight tape that I think it is, and I will match up those pins looking straight down onto the sight tape and find the one that matches my 20-yard pin, and I get right over the top of it, and I'm trying to match up my 20 and my 40 as close as I possibly can, looking straight down. And the closer you can get and the more accurate you're sighted in, the better your sight tape's going to be. So with this pin gap, it looks like my sight tape is about 252. It says 252 FPS. The numbers on our sight tapes, just for everybody's information, these will get you close if you chronograph your bow, but they're really a reference so you know to go faster or slower. And when you're setting up your sight tapes and you step back and you dial out to those other distances, just remember, if you're shooting low, you need a slower sight tape. If you're shooting high, you need a faster sight tape. And that's how you'll go back and forth with those. A couple other ways you can do this. You can measure this pin gap and measure that up on your sight tapes as well. You can also, if you're shooting a single pin sight, put a blank piece of tape on here. You can use masking tape or whatever. Mark your 20-yard spot, and then as you go down, mark each individual yardage that you go out to. You can dial out to 40, 50, 60. The farther out you get, obviously the more accurate the sight tape is going to be, or the closer you're going to get right off the first bat. And just also another thing to remember when you're doing your sight tapes, when you put it on, it might not be perfect. Make sure you step back to the farthest distance you are comfortable shooting and practice at that distance with that, and that's where you'll really determine how accurate your sight tape is. We're getting ready to cut out these sight tapes. You'll notice there's numbers on both sides. One of the things you want to make sure of is you get the numbers on the correct side of the sight. So we're just going to cut out this 252 feet a second sight tape. And the really awesome thing about this dual indicator system is with the single indicator needle, which I personally have been using for several years, you cut it off at wherever your bottom pin is. With this dual indicator system, you actually get the opportunity to put a 20-yard pin in, etc. So as we check this is what we know. We don't want to cut off the numbers on the inside, so I'll just do that really quick here. And try to cut it as close, as straight as you possibly can. Obviously I didn't do that there. But the neat thing is now is what we're going to do. We know we've got this dialed in. We're where we want to be. We're going to peel that sight tape off. And then as you see, the reason why I cut those numbers out to the one side, and this is the other neat thing about these indicator needles, is they are adjustable. So if you don't get your sight tape right in the perfect spot where you want it, you can go back and adjust the needle down or up. So as I put that sight tape on, what I might also do here is I might just slip this up a little bit and trim this top section off, even though I know it's 252. We'll just chop that off so I can get a little more room on my. So as I move that, I put my tape on, and you see I've got my tape on. It's square on there. I can dial my sight up and down, and it's not catching on the tape. And yes, it does look like my 20-yard spot is up a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to get your inch set, and most inch sets have the 0.05, and you can come in and adjust your indicator. Loosen, slide it up, and it looks like I'm already maxed out at the top there. Is what I could do, and this is one of the neat features about this dual indicator needle system, and the reason why we send you extra needles is you can swap these needles around. So I'm going to set these over here, and I'll just show you guys this really quick. And the other thing I could have done, and I still can do, is I can move this sight tape down a little bit. Obviously we're not going to be able to get 100 yards out of this particular tape because of the speed of the bow, just assuming, and I was just matching it off of the tapes there. But as you see, these indicator needles, see how they're bent and they're offset and separate. So as you see, the dual indicator needles are offset, bent different directions. The neat thing about this is you can set them up this way to get them as close as possible, or say you're building a 5-pin sight and you want to go the opposite direction. You can offset them so they're farther apart on the movable section in here. So as you go to put your indicator needles back on, if you've made the decision to swap those around or move them around, it can be kind of tricky to get the needle in through here. What I recommend doing is slipping it into the groove and then sliding it up, and you can pull it up with your finger, and then you take your screw and put your screw, start your screw in the hole, and you see that needle can move around. You see you have about 10 yards of adjustment with that needle. You're not really putting yourself into any bad position, so I'm going to set that up at 20 yards. Another quick tip on this, anytime you're moving any of the indicator needles, you notice I did that with that dialed all the way to the top. I could have dialed it a little bit lower, made it easier to put on. But one of the things you always want to make sure you're double checking so you don't wreck your indicator needle is dial it up and make sure you're not hitting the top or the bottom so you don't bend your indicator needle. So now that I've got the top one in, I am going to dial that sight down just slightly so it's easier to slip that second needle in. As you slip that in there, grab that 0.5 wrench, get that screw started. So now I'm going to dial this back up to the top, And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that indicator needle to match up to my bottom pin at 40 yards. So now that you've got your dual indicator needle set up for your 20-yard pin and your 40-yard pin in conjunction with your top pin and your bottom pin that you've already sighted in at 20, 30, 40, now this is where the dual indicator gets exciting. Is say you have a shot at 35 yards you want to dial into. Now you can just dial your sight down to 35 yards and use your top pin. If you want to use your bottom pin, now you can look and see. People always wonder when you dial your movable sight where you're at with your second pin or your bottom pin. Well, as you see here, we're at 52 yards and at a 35 yard with my top pin. So if you ever catch yourself in the stand or in a hunting situation where you've dialed on an animal, you now have a reference point of what all your pins are going to be at. One of the things we like to call this is dial close, dial far. So you can dial in everything in those short distances between 20 and 40 if you'd like to use your top pin, and use your bottom pin to dial everything out for your longer shots, 40, 50, 60. You want to make a shot at 46 yards using your bottom pin, you're there. If you want to make a shot using your top pin at 46 yards, you can do that as well. So it just gives you a lot more options, so you truly do have a pin for that now with this Mountain Lite series sight. Don't overthink about it, just use it, have fun with it, and you're going to make some great shots. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to talk to your local dealer or give us a call here at Black Gold or email us at info@blackgoldsights.com.